Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas and beyond. With Tommy, Castor and Weston Mills. This is Keeper of the Games.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Keeper of the Games. We are the wildly underqualified yet mildly entertaining podcast all about sports in the air capital of Wichita, Kansas and beyond. Along with Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. It is Thanksgiving week, and because of that, we are dropping a new episode of Keeper of the Games a day early. You can call it your appetizer to your Thanksgiving Day dinner. And so before we dive into those mashed potatoes and the turkey and the pumpkin pie, we've got some great sports talk for you here on Keeper of the Games. Weston, what's up, man? You ready for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll be watching basketball instead of football. Well, I'll probably still watch plenty of football, but boy, KU basketball on Thanksgiving, that's going to be a little bit different than in years past.
Yeah, it really is. And it just sort of seems like, you know, we talked about it last week on the show. We're so not used to watching KU basketball on Thanksgiving Day. Like, we know that there's usually basketball that gets started, you know, the weekend of Thanksgiving, but on Thanksgiving Day is usually reserved for NFL football games. But I kind of like you, I think I'm going to have to take a break from watching those NFL games and check out some KU basketball.
Yeah, I think we may have to go with even the dual TV setup. We'll have KU on the big one, then I'll probably keep the football on the side. I just got to watch football on Thanksgiving. It just feels right.
It does feel right. And what also feels right is that you and I are together doing another podcast episode, even though it is the holidays. That's our dedication. That's the sacrifice to our CogPod fans out there, that we're here doing a new episode of the podcast when we could easily have, you know, called this week off, phoned it in and said, you know what, it's a holiday week, we're not going to do a show. But damn it, here we are doing another podcast.
And not only that, we're dedicated enough to bring you a KU basketball expert right before the first game of the season. So, Tommy, we really are, you know, I hate to, you know, we don't toot our own horn very often, but you know what? Give it up to us for really putting this together right at the perfect time.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And we'll get to that interview here in just a moment or so. We'll tell you who we have here as our guest on this Thanksgiving week edition of Keeper of the Games here in just a second. Before we get to that, want to remind you to hit subscribe. That way, anytime we have a brand new episode of the podcast, you'll get a notification. Of course, you can listen to us anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. We're on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, all of the major ones. You can listen to the podcast right there. Check out our website at cogsports.com, where you can find archived episodes. You can watch videos there on our website, kogsports.com. And you can watch full episodes on YouTube and Facebook by searching for Keeper of the Games. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CogPod. That's at KOGPod. So last week, Weston, on the podcast, we were lucky enough and fortunate enough to have Aliyah Funschelle. She is with the website sportswithaliyah.com. She's an insider. She's a blogger. She's a reporter. We had her on to talk all things Wichita State basketball. And that was a great conversation on last week's episode. And we thought, how do we continue that? How do we bring on more insiders to talk about the major college basketball programs in our state? So we were so thrilled and so excited to have the opportunity to talk to Gary Bedore. He's a longtime sports writer. Now he's with the Kansas City Star. And he is, I guess probably for lack of a better term, the biggest insider, in my opinion, at least, when it comes to KU basketball, at least one of them. He's in that upper echelon of being inside that program, knowing the heartbeat and what's happening with Bill Self's crew there in Lawrence. And so we reached out to him. He was gracious enough to appear on the show. And so we're really looking forward to this conversation with Gary Bedore. So let's go to that right now. Hey, we are pleased to welcome to the podcast Gary Bedore from the Kansas City Star joining us here as we talk all things KU basketball. You know, Gary, first off, welcome to the show. Before we get any further, really appreciate you being here.
Good to be here.
Yes.
Ready to go. Season starts Thursday.
Absolutely. So, and, you know, it's hard to believe, Gary, that, you know, all the way back in March, it seems like so long ago that this season was cut short due to COVID-19, but here we are. Like you mentioned, the first KU basketball game kicks off on Thanksgiving. At least we hope so, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
The number one team in America, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. So first things first, what are you hearing as far as the status of the game right now? I mean, I know I saw that both Coach Self and Coach Few, at least today, said that everything is good. Are you hearing anything different right now?
No, I've just heard that they left about 1 o'clock today. KU flew out there. Self yesterday said that everybody was going to make the trip. So I guess there's a chance that, the test results came in badly, but we haven't heard anything negative yet. KU did say that just like in football, they won't be saying if anybody has COVID until the game. And then they won't say it is COVID if they're not there, but you can deduce it. Football's lost several guys all year. They've lost some of their best players every single game. So as of today, there's been no negative words, and I assume Gonzaga went out there today too. So hopefully it won't get canceled, tomorrow.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
They do have an extra day there. They're supposed to all get tested before the game, so anything can happen. One test will cost – one test positive will end the game, so on either team. So you got to hope it's played.
Yep, definitely. Fingers crossed that, for both Kansas and Gonzaga, that they're able to get through the next couple of days with no positive tests. Obviously, it seems like the key for any team this season, not just the Jayhawks, is flexibility, being able to sort of be on your toes when it comes to scheduling, when it comes to, what the next couple months are going to look like, because nobody really exactly knows, exactly what's going to happen, especially as we get into Big 12 play. What do you know about sort of that flexible mindset that the Jayhawks kind of have to have going into the season?
Well, the problem is if you get a positive, you have to sit out the next 14 days as a team. So until they change that rule, and the CDC supposedly this week is going to announce something to relax that a bit, because let's say they got a COVID, let's say that somebody comes down with it and they can't play and they return home tomorrow, they can't play for 14 more days. And that, which would wipe out 3 or 4 games. They've got a ton of games coming up. Then, like Self says, you're not going to be ready to play right away after sitting out 14 days. So they've got to change that to where if somebody's positive, you have to test every day. And if everybody else is negative, you got to go ahead and play, because there's a ton of teams that are already, as you know, are already out. Rick Barnes came down with COVID. Scott Drew's got it. So they're just starting their 14-day quarantine as a team. If that 14-day thing hits you, you're going to lose a ton of games, and then you're not going to be ready when you come back because you can't practice. So as far as flexibility, the Jayhawks are deep. So they've got a ton of perimeter players, and, in terms of bodies, they should be okay unless they have injuries too. But the problem is this 14-day quarantine. If there's one positive test, that includes coaches, managers, players. So, I don't know. That's why everybody says the season's going to not work, because too many teams are going to be out for 14 days and then be worthless for the next 7 days.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead, Weston.
Gary, I was just going to jump in real quick. So you mentioned, KU's deep this year, and I think this is probably a good segue, into talking a little bit about the team. Every year I feel like with college basketball, you always have a new group of guys come in, and that's kind of the first thing you do as a fan. That first game, you watch it and go, wait, who are these new faces? And we didn't get that with your normal Fort Hays State game or Washburn game. So what new faces should Jayhawk fans be expecting, on the court this year?
Well, Self has already said that he'll open with the 4 returnees. McCormack, Christian Brown, Ochai, and Marcus Garrett. So your fifth starter will be a guard. It'll either be Bryce Thompson or Tyon Grant Foster. Thompson was ranked 20th by Rivals, McDonald's All-American. Self recruited him so hard, and he's from Oklahoma. I would expect he'll start because generally you get a McDonald's All-American, you don't want to, you got to worry about future recruiting classes. Right. Bryce, at least from the start, should be given a chance. Now, that doesn't guarantee it because Self is real high on Tyon Grant Foster, who was one of the JUCO's best players last year. And Self said he's had incredible scoring sprees at practice. Gonzaga is usually good on offense, so he might, if Tyon is that good a scorer, he might want to, maybe he'll beat out Bryce. But the other perimeter guys, you got Tristan Enaruna, who looked good at times last year. You got Jalen Wilson, who Self said has improved a ton. He was hurt last year, redshirt freshman. You got DeJuan Harris, who we haven't heard a lot about, at the backup point from Kansas City. He's a redshirt freshman. Jethro Muscadin is a 7-foot freshman, but he probably isn't ready to beat out Mitch Lightfoot for the backup big man. So they've got a lot of freshmen and sophomores to go with Marcus Garrett, Mitch Lightfoot. Ochai is a junior now, so they're loaded on the perimeter with 6 or 7 guys. They only have 3 bigs. Lightfoot is a pretty good fill-in. He's going to have to do more than just be average, though, because David McCormack sometimes gets in foul trouble.
Yeah.
But you would think they're pretty deep at this moment.
Gary, I want to talk here in just a couple of minutes about your thoughts on both Devon, Dotson, and Udoka Azubuike in the draft last week. But obviously, those two standout performers are no longer with the Jayhawks. And you just talked about how there are only 3 big men on the roster this year for the Jayhawks. Surely Kansas will miss that presence of Big Doke down low. And obviously, David McCormack is a fine player, and Mitch Lightfoot always brings a lot of energy. But what are some of the things that you think the Jayhawks will have to do to compensate for the fact that they don't have Udoka down low?
Well, he was so good on the lob. Dotson found him quite a bit, but not as much as some of the other guys. That was one of the knocks entering the draft on Dotson, believe it or not, was that he didn't really get a ton of assists in college. But they're going to miss Doke's shot blocking, although McCormack he got better at that at the end of last year. McCormack supposedly can hit up to 12-foot jumper, so he'll be taking those, and Doke really couldn't do that. McCormack also can hit free throws, at least in the past he has.
Yeah.
So Self is going to be banking on David to get the ball a lot and to score a lot. If he gets 2 quick fouls, though, Mitch comes in, and Mitch, the guy's only 6'8" or so. A lot of schools like Creighton, he might be out there bombing threes, but it sounds like Bill wants him to be a 5, which I'm sure he can do, but, how good is Mitch compared to other top program 5s?
Sure.
So I'm sure he'll do fine, but we haven't heard a lot about Muscadin either. Self hasn't really talked about him much, and we can't go to practice, so I don't really know. No one's going to redshirt because you don't have to. You get an extra year of eligibility. The NCAA's given everybody another year. So there's no reason to redshirt anybody. So I would assume he will throw Muscadin in there what if Mitch and David get in foul trouble? So, or he could play 5 guards. Because again, he's loaded at the guard, and Bill has fallen in love with the 4-guard system. And if Muscadin's not ready and those two bigs get in foul trouble, it'll be 5 guards probably. If Muscadin is okay from the start, he'd probably throw him in there because he's 7 foot.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you look at sort of the lineups that Bill has thrown out on the court over the last couple of years, there were some moments, over the last 2 years or so where you saw Bill playing two bigs. Obviously the 4 guard, one big is really kind of where I think he, like you just said, he loves that system. It'd be crazy to watch 5 guards out on the court playing for KU.
It really would for Bill. But if Jalen Wilson and Tristan Enaruna are really good and they're better than Mitch and, Muscadin, he might go with that because we don't know, like you said, we don't get to see him play Washburn or anybody. So if these guys are really special, he could play 5 guards because Jalen Wilson was a top 50 recruit. Enaruna, big-time programs wanted him. And Tyon Grant-Foster and Bryce Thompson allegedly are going to be 2 of the better players in the league in a year or so. So it should be interesting to see if he goes ever with 5 guards.
So, Gary, who are we looking at? And as we just talked about, they lost, Doak and Dotson. Who's going to be the guy that we're looking at to go out and, take the ball and score points? I mean, I think, we've seen Ochai, kind of do it at times. Yeah. He take that step. Marcus Garrett's obviously going to have the ball in his hands, and or do we see one of the freshmen like you said, Tyon Grant-Foster or Bryce Thompson supposed to be that guy? Do we know who might be the guy this year for Kansas?
I think as of now, without seeing him play much, it should be Ochai because they say Bill has said he's improved his deep shot. So if he could hit 3 threes a game or 4, he might be logical. Now, Garrett, the last couple years with Graham, Devontae, and Dotson taking it to the hole like they do, and Marcus even did that a little last year. I'm sure he's going to do that, but how much of a scorer can Garrett be? We don't know. I think he averaged 9 last year or a little less. But if Ochai can stick threes and hit, get some offensive rebounds and stuff like that, on paper you would think it would be him because he averaged 10 last year, and you would think he could improve that. But Christian Brown, from what everybody says, is really good.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens with him, But I don't really know, since this is a strange year with COVID and them having no exhibition games. It's probably going to be whoever is playing well at that time because Bill doesn't want to lose to Gonzaga. And, if Tyon comes out and goes nuts and hits a couple threes, how Bill will play it 35 to 40 minutes if he has to. He wants to win that game. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting how, going back to that whole topic of no exhibition games and, very little preparation on opponents. And it's, there's just it's got to be difficult for not just KU, but for any team in America.
Yeah.
That nobody really has any film on anybody, and even guys like you, Gary, not really able to really watch the team a whole lot right now and scout them and get information on, exactly how they're playing. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind, I guess, started, right?
Yeah. And for the opener, maybe it's good that Gonzaga is known more for offense than defense because maybe it'll just be a shootout. But we shall see. I think Bill would be thrilled if they could leave. They have a game Friday too against St. Joseph's. So to get 2 wins there and see what he's got, can you imagine how much he's going to learn about his team in 2 games?
Yeah.
Because one is against the number 1 ranked team, and then the next game's against the team that won 6 games last year. That's all. So, and then you play Kentucky on Tuesday. So he might have to go with the most experienced guys if, to win. Mitch is so experienced. he might be a security blanket for Bill. David, play him as much as he can, if he stays out of foul trouble. Ochai, he's going to play 36 minutes. And Marcus will play the whole game probably. So if they can stay healthy. But on paper, the Jayhawks are ranked 6th, and that's pretty good ranking, I would say.
The goal for sure is to stay healthy, right? And to test negative, as much as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, Gary, let's go back to the NBA draft. So Udoka Azubuike drafted 27th by the Utah Jazz. And then Devon Dotson fell in the draft, wasn't drafted at all, signed by his hometown team, the Chicago Bulls, as an undrafted free agent. Were you surprised, number one, by where Dotson fell, and then also the placement where Udoka was drafted by the Jazz?
Yeah, I had heard that Toronto might take Dotson at 29, and they did take a guard. I forget who they took. But Toronto didn't even take him in the second round. So obviously the scouts ultimately decided that he's not the kind of guy you have to have on your team. Whether he's not a great shooter in college, although Devontae Graham improved his shooting a ton. Devon was not an incredible assist guy, but he was so fast, and he's listed at 6'2", which is good enough. So I figured everybody that had picked him mid-second round was probably right. He ended up going all the way through without getting picked. Somebody was saying that his agent told teams not to take him, but I don't know about that. I think, judging from how disappointed he was, I think they didn't – in other words, they knew the Bulls were going to sign him, which they did like 10 minutes after the draft.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect fit for Devon because the Bulls need guards. So – if he could pick a team, it would probably be the Bulls for that reason, not to mention he's from Chicago. But I was surprised because every mock draft had him mid-second or early second. And then Doak, I have a couple scouts I know, and one guy really loved his game, but you kept hearing over and over that he's not meant to be a modern NBA big. His free throws are so bad, that
right.
You'd think that it would keep him from getting picked. But I was happy because you stay 4 years, you dominate college. Why not take a guy like that if you're the NBA? Give him a shot. And they say after the first 20 picks or so, most of those guys aren't going to be stars anyway. So why not reward the college player of the year? Like, Perry Ellis didn't get drafted, and he was a great college player. Why couldn't somebody just bring him to camp as a second-round pick?
Right.
Again, they don't really need all those picks. So Doak's got it made. He gets a guaranteed contract, so he'll be around for at least one contract. And then Dotson, he gets paid. I don't know what the two-way players make, but it's going to be good money for him. So hopefully they'll both make it. KU's had a lot of draftees lately. That Frank Mason's a free agent now, so it'll be interesting to see who wants him. The knock is he's not tall enough, I guess, 5'11". Even though he's MVP of the G League, the Bucs made him a unrestricted free agent, so anybody can sign Frank.
Right.
Devontae's set with the Hornets. They love him. So,
yeah. Marcus Morris just signed was a 5-year, $65 million contract.
Yeah, he got one of those Scott Pollard type deals. Pollard got that, and Ostertag got one of those back in the day. But Marcus has a, wow, for a kind of a role player, even Marcus is. But a lot of people were saying he's a good guy to have around because you know how ornery is in the playoffs. And he'll guard the other team's best forward.
Right, right.
Hey, and to get to stay in town with his brother too. That's nice.
Yeah, Markeith, those two, they're so close.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
great.
do need. It probably helps to have those guys together because Marcus has a short fuse.
They kind of calm each other down a little bit, I guess, is what I've always heard. Hey, I'm not sure that I've seen a player transform himself and his game from his freshman year to his senior year quite like Udoka Azubuike did. I mean, just from watching him as a freshman, and just he was a big body, but he was so limited in what he could do, and especially he kind of had just that lob. I mean, that was pretty much all that he had. And just developing into the player that he became his senior year, and then getting drafted in the first round. I would imagine that not just Coach Self, but the entire coaching staff, the strength coach, all of that, they've got to be pretty proud of that development from Udoka during his time in Lawrence.
Yeah, and you would think it would help recruit other big men that are not on the top of the world in high school yet, that they can develop you.
Yep.
Is there any talk that Jethro might be taking that same development path that Udoka took, or is he a different player altogether?
I don't really know about his game yet, but I think he's a shot blocker too.
Yeah.
And he's films I've seen of him, he's pretty good. But I don't think he averaged a great point total in high school. He went to a school in Louisville last year and averaged, I think, low double figures points. But at late night, he looked good. I thought he looked like he belonged.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, absolutely, Gary.
I know
I'm guessing
they would have redshirted him if they need. This year again, you don't need to redshirt.
Right.
Marcus Garrett could come back next year if he wanted to, because nobody's year counts this year.
That's awesome.
That'd be pretty crazy if Garrett was back for sure. I'm assuming right now you're not in Fort Myers, right?
No.
Do you get to go to any of the games and watch them play, or how does that work with COVID right now?
Well, the company won't allow any travel, so no road games right now.
Gotcha.
For us, home games, KU's going to allow 10 media, and we've got 2 guys that cover the team, so I don't know if we'll trade off or what's going to happen, because the first 2 games have no fans now. They've decided, and I don't know if they'll stick to that 10 media or add to it, or because normally KU – we'll have 40 or 50 media there. So we don't really know about home games. But right now, no travel. And, there's no fans at the game against Kentucky, I believe. They're going to let in a couple hundred fans for the Gonzaga game. But not one outlet that covers KU is going to Florida. I know that.
That's just crazy to think that you've got – the number 1 team in America and the number 6 team in America on Thanksgiving Day in Fort Myers, Florida, and there's not a single media outlet that can cover it because of just the world that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, obviously, you don't
have Zoom calls.
They have Zoom calls. You can't predict what's going to happen. We have no idea, but just this is kind of a situation where you just got to take it one day at a time, one game at a time, and just see what ends up happening. And hopefully by the time, we get to Big 12 play and then deeper into the conference and into March Madness, that, hopefully we have what resembles a normal season, I guess. Yeah.
Because even if we were out in Florida, we don't even know if they're going to play for sure Thursday.
Right.
I mean, could get called. Wichita State went to their tournament, I believe, and had to turn around and come back.
Yep.
So,
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting world that we're in right now. And, obviously we'll just take it, like I said, a game at a time. And hopefully as of right now, as of this recording, the Jayhawks are scheduled to play the Gonzaga Bulldogs on Thanksgiving Day at 12:30 in the Rocket Mortgage Fort Myers tip-off. So you can enjoy a little bit of turkey and stuffing and watch some KU basketball at the same time. Gary, we really appreciate you being on the podcast. Hopefully maybe you can come back. Maybe we get a little bit later on in the season. And, we can do this again and talk more KU hoops if that's good with you.
Sure. And let's hope that they have another good year, because anything can happen, as you know.
Yeah,
that's right.
As the football team has proven, hard enough for KU, but to be without 4 or 5 of their best players every game,
yeah,
they've had no chance.
Well, hopefully we have a more positive KU basketball season than we've had KU football season. I'm sure that's not going to be difficult to do, but we'll keep our fingers crossed on all of that. It's Gary Bedore from the Kansas City Star joining us here on Keeper of the Games.
Thanks.
That was Gary Bedore. And Tommy, that was the perfect segment to have Gary Bedore, KU insider extraordinaire, like we mentioned, on right before they play Gonzaga. A ton of information he gave to us there. What was your biggest takeaway from Gary?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Weston, is just, the amount of flexibility that's going to have to happen from the Jayhawks and their opponents and the entire college basketball world. I mean, just the fact that one negative test from anybody in the program will shut down a game. I think it's going to be difficult to get through an entire season without a shutdown for sure. And I think it's going to be important for Jayhawk fans, and for not just Jayhawk fans, but college basketball fans in general, to just be patient, and to just understand that this is not normal, and doing it this way is still better than the alternative of not having games at all. Wouldn't you say? Yeah,
absolutely. And that, you're right. I mean, that was news to me. I actually, I feel like I've kind of pushed what was going on with college basketball aside with everything going on in the football world. And I didn't know that that's the protocol that they were, going to be by. So it was kind of, nice to have Gary explain that to us in here. And, and I think for me, one of the things I really took away from his, our time with him was some of the new faces that we're going to see. I think Tyon Grant Foster is someone, it's a name that, I don't think it made a big splash in the recruiting. I don't know if a lot of KU fans, now he's from Kansas City, Kansas, so a lot of folks up here in Kansas City may know the name already. But that's a name that you're going to see, I think, right off the bat from KU. And so it was kind of nice to get to hear a little bit of those names. I think, everybody knows Bryce Thompson, but to hear Tyon, hear a little bit about Tyon Grant Foster right off the bat was good to know.
I'm really excited to watch Bryce Thompson play. I mean, he's a highly recruited, highly regarded player coming in for the Jayhawks. And on top of that, I'm excited to see the development of some guys that have a lot of potential. Ochai Agbaji is a player that I think that all Jayhawk fans have wanted more out of him. They see his physique. They see what he could be, and they see flashes of it. But they haven't gotten the full experience yet from Ochai. And so I'm hopeful that, as Gary mentioned, that his development has, continued to grow. And, I'm optimistic that he'll be a major contributor for the Jayhawks this season. And then finally, I'm really interested to see Marcus Garrett handling the point. We saw him do that a little bit last season, like when Devon Dotson would go to the bench, or was in foul trouble or something. But, to see that floor general position be Marcus Garrett's job going into this season, I think we're in for a treat watching that as the season progresses.
Yeah. And in my mind, there's no doubt that Marcus Garrett at the 1 is the best fit for him. It creates, that opportunity where defenses can no longer sag off him or help off of him, because he does struggle shooting the ball. When he has the ball in his hands, they have no choice but to be on ball and defending him, which then I think opens up everything for everyone else. So I think it's a great fit for him. And I think it really could, open up this offense to see a lot of scoring from a lot of different guys, as opposed to where we've kind of seen in the past, Dotson and Doak kind of took all the scoring. I think you're going to see a lot of balance, a lot of, I think you could see 5 guys in double digits every night, but no one higher than 15, on any given night, kind of in that range. So.
And, Marcus Garrett had the opportunity last season and, pretty much his entire Jayhawk career. What he was known for was turning defense into offense, right? And having great defensive plays result in points scored for KU. He's going to have the opportunity now to be the facilitator on both ends of the court and turn offense into more offense as the point guard. So just a lot to look forward to. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we have a game on Thursday against Gonzaga which will be on Fox at 12:30 p.m. It's the Rocket Mortgage Fort Myers tip-off, KU against the number one team in America, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. We're going to stay on college basketball now. And just very quickly before we get into this, just one more time, thank you to Gary Bedore from the Kansas City Star for coming on the podcast and taking some time out to share his knowledge and wisdom about KU basketball. So just again, a big thanks to Gary. But again, we're going to stay in college basketball and talk about Wichita State University. Gary actually mentioned this in our interview with him and alluded to it, brought it up, that Wichita State, they're not playing in the tournament that they were scheduled to play in this coming weekend. They're going to have to wait at least another week to play basketball. They pulled out of the Bad Boy Mowers Crossover Classic in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It comes after, from what Wichita State Athletics says, are multiple positive COVID-19 tests within the team travel party. The Shockers had already traveled to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They were already there, and now they're traveling back to Wichita without even playing a game. Weston, this is something that we're going to continue to see, I think, at least for the time being in college basketball, but definitely a bummer for Shocker fans that they're not going to get a chance to watch the Shockers play in this opening tournament, but it's kind of the reality that we're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gary kind of touched on it. It probably is going to create a mess this season. So there's not a whole lot more to say, at least on that note, because he's right. It's spot on. I mean, there's going to be a mess, and there's not a whole lot that can be done about it right now until they change those guidelines. But I think for the Shockers, it's a disappointment for fans. But do you think it's kind of a relief for Isaac Brown and his guys, as with the big transition and everything that happened, to just kind of catch their breaths and get an extra week of practice before they actually have to take on an opponent? I think it may be beneficial in the long run that the Shockers missed out here.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think that the official position is going to be, we're disappointed. It is what it is. We're taking all the safety precautions. Our kids are probably bummed that they can't play in this tournament. But I think you're probably right that deep down and behind the scenes, you're probably seeing a little bit of relief, a little bit of, okay, we get a chance to get healthy. Let's hope that this hasn't spread among the entire team, and hopefully there aren't more delays to the start of the season for the Shockers, but who knows? We saw that happen, with a couple of teams where, just recently where, they pulled out of their opening game, and then all of a sudden they weren't going to be able to play next week or the week after that, because the COVID cases were spreading like they were. So hopefully that's not the case for Wichita State, and they'll be able to get back on schedule after this opening weekend tournament. But, they were, I think the worst part about it is that they had already traveled there, right? They were already there. They were ready to play. And then they have to get right back on the bus and go back home and try to find a way to, I guess, separate those who had positive tests from those who don't have positive tests and get them home safely in a separate way. It's got to be a little bit of a logistical nightmare, I would think, to get back home.
Yeah. And that's, really, I talk about having that extra time to practice, but I think just the time and commitment they put in getting there, obviously that's going to be a disappointment for everybody. But again, this is the first time it's happening. It's probably not going to be the last time it happens. Whether it's them actually going and they're the team that tested positive, or they have an opponent coming in to Wichita to play that then has to cancel because they tested positive. It's the first time, but it's not going to be the last. So I think it's something that everybody's just going to have to adjust to.
Yeah, so as of now, the remaining non-conference schedule is still in place, and it looks like it's still planning to be played as of right now for Wichita State. The home opener is set for next Wednesday, December 2nd, against Oral Roberts. Then they play Missouri at home at Koch Arena on December 6th, and then they wrap up the regular season schedule on December 12th at home against Oklahoma State. The other thing to keep in mind is that that's the non-conference schedule right there for Wichita State, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at 3 games outside of this tournament that was supposed to happen this weekend for the Shockers. They're going to get 3 non-conference games, hopefully, fingers crossed, before the American schedule sets in, which is not going to be an easy schedule. It's not going to be a walk in the park for Wichita State. So while I think the Shockers are probably grateful for the extra time in practice. They're not going to get a whole lot of non-conference opponents to play before they start their conference play.
Yeah, it just makes conference play that much more important, and especially, I mean, they've got to be, one of the top probably 3 teams in the American, maybe top 4. I mean, obviously we'll see how the season shakes down, but if they want to get into the tournament. So that's kind of where you're looking. And obviously for them, a goal will be to win the American, which automatically gets you in. But, you really, really got to play everybody tough and win a whole lot of games in the American if you're going to, get that bid.
Yeah, the Shockers were picked, I think, middle of the road in the American in the preseason polls. I want to say they were picked 6th or 7th, something like that. But, again, who knows? Like we were talking about, with Gary, nobody really has any idea how these teams are going to actually perform. It's been so long since we've seen college basketball. They do kick off their American schedule on the 15th of December against rival Tulsa. That's how they start the American conference season. More Wichita State news, which is something that is really interesting that I want to get your thoughts on, Weston. Isaac Brown announced that he rounded out his assistant coaches, with Billy Kennedy coming in to be a new assistant coach on Isaac Brown's staff for the Shockers. Of course, Billy Kennedy is the former head coach of Texas A&M. And coincidentally, he replaced Mark Turgeon as the Aggies head coach when Turgeon left to go to Maryland several years ago. Now Billy Kennedy is Isaac Brown's assistant in Wichita. I think this is a great move, considering Isaac Brown is, not an experienced head coach, to bring on somebody like Billy Kennedy, who has many, many years of D1 head coaching experience, to be on the bench next to him. And I think that that's about as good of a get that you can get to be on your staff a week before the season starts. Your thoughts on Billy Kennedy, now an assistant coach for the Shockers?
Yeah, so I actually think that speaks volumes to Isaac Brown to kind of set his ego aside and say, hey, I'm fine with hiring an assistant coach that has, much more experience than me. Because I know that I'm new here as a head coach, and I'd love to have someone sitting right there beside me, that's been through X, Y, and Z, and that he can bounce that off to. And obviously I think they had their relationship goes back to Isaac Brown playing at A&M when Billy Kennedy was as grad assistant at A&M or an assistant coach. I'm actually not sure. Probably an assistant coach, I'm thinking, just based on the age. So I think the relationship goes back to that. But I think very savvy move by Isaac Brown to, extend that out to such a veteran head coach.
So what do you think the odds are? And I'm sure that this is something that Shocker fans, I'm guessing, have probably already thought about. It's obviously not something that will be discussed anytime soon. But what do you think the odds are that Billy Kennedy ends up the head coach at Wichita State? And after this season with Isaac Brown as the interim, they just swap places and Isaac Brown stays on Billy Kennedy's staff?
I say slim to none. That's just a gut reaction. I just don't. I mean, it sounds like to me this is Isaac Brown's hire. And I do feel like Wichita State could at least get I'm not saying a better coach, because I'm not saying Billy Kennedy is a bad coach, but get a bigger name than Billy Kennedy if they want to go the route other than, their assistant coach that they've already put in the interim spot that it seems like a lot of the players really love. I think it's going to be Isaac Brown or a big name, relative big name.
So this could very easily be just a 1-year stint for Billy Kennedy in Wichita. I mean, I can't imagine if what you're saying ends up happening and a bigger name comes in after the season.
Yeah,
it'd be hard for me to think that Billy Kennedy would remain on the staff, for somebody else other than Isaac Brown. So I think you're either looking at, if it's Isaac Brown or if it's Billy Kennedy, if it stays in that group, then you'll see him back. If it's somebody else, I can't imagine that either one of those guys will stay in Wichita, would just be my thought. But at the end of the day, I think this is an awesome hire to have somebody with the experience like Billy Kennedy on the bench. And just knowing, just from everything we've heard about Isaac Brown, I would be shocked if Brown doesn't consult with Billy Kennedy on different things related to being the head coach during the course of the season. How do you do X, Y, and Z? How does this work as the head coach? Having that counsel from a guy like Billy Kennedy, I think, will be invaluable for Isaac.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Anytime you're in a lot of coaches don't get their first head coaching opportunity at a program, of the caliber of Wichita State. Usually they're, coming from a smaller program first into that driver's seat where, Isaac Brown went from, being the right-hand man to Greg Marshall to then in the driver's seat with none of that kind of small college basketball experience in between. So having Billy Kennedy there to ask whatever question behind closed doors, I think it's going to be invaluable for Isaac Brown and really help this Shocker basketball team.
Yeah, from what I read, apparently Isaac Brown texted Billy Kennedy, seeing if he would have any interest. Kennedy said yes, and he was driving to Wichita on Sunday to sign the contract with his family, and then loaded up with the team to go to Sioux Falls on Monday, and now is heading back to Wichita after they had to pull out of that tournament. So that will give Billy Kennedy a little bit more time to get acquainted with the players, figure out the way that the program works and all of that. So we'll give him a little bit more time, I guess, to get his feet wet in the Wichita State program. Our final topic that is related to Wichita State basketball, we absolutely cannot ignore this, and we don't want to. We absolutely want to talk about this. Congratulations to Fred VanVleet and the contract that he signed with the Toronto Raptors. It's the largest contract ever signed by an undrafted player in NBA history. 4 years, $85 million for Fred VanVleet. Just absolutely incredible, and congratulations to Fred. That's awesome.
That man bet on himself and he cashed in. So I'll tell you what, though, I don't really have an NBA team per se, but I kind of was rooting for him to go to the Knicks. I think the NBA is fun when the Knicks are relevant. Madison Square Garden has such a history. And I think they do have some young talent there. So I kind of wanted to see him go there. Maybe it's just the red-blooded American in me. I don't want him to be in Canada. I want him over here in the States. But
well, they will be. They will be, because the Raptors won't play in Toronto this year.
That's true, but they're also not going to play in Kansas City like we made a bid for. So the Toronto Raptors are dead to me with the exceptions of Fred VanVleet, now that they're playing in Tampa instead.
VanVleet is going to have higher expectations. That's just a given with that contract that he signed. But I think he can handle that. And especially considering, just what I know about the way that Toronto Raptors roster is built with VanVleet out there. Kyle Lowry is getting up there in age. And so it's going to be up to Fred VanVleet, especially now with this contract, to be the top playmaker for Toronto, to be the guy that pretty much leads that squad, especially in the backcourt. And so, he's got his expectations. He's got his contract. But like you said at the very beginning, he has made his entire career off of betting on himself. Yeah. And he's done a great job at that. He did that at Wichita State, and now he's doing it with Toronto. So I couldn't be happier for the guy. It's crazy to me that, I think we all knew how talented he was, but it's just crazy for me to think that this guy played in Wichita his entire college career and is now a legitimate star in the NBA. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a good dude, and he's always kind of had that ice in his veins mentality. So stepping into one of the big playmaker roles, they do have Pascal Siakam there. So, I mean, I think it's kind of that's what they're looking for the future of Toronto to be, is Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam as that kind of one-two duo, as, like you mentioned, Kyle Lowry transitioning out. So congratulations to the man. Fred VanVleet deserves, everything that is coming his way.
And it's a great reminder that if you're ever trying to do something, ever trying to accomplish something, bet on yourself, do whatever it takes to make that happen. And he's been an inspiration for a lot of people, at least here locally. And so our hats go off to Fred VanVleet and that contract that he signed with the Raptors. Let's get into some NFL news. We're talking the Kansas City Chiefs coming off their primetime nail-biter victory against the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday night. Final score 35-31. You and I, Weston, I think we owe a couple of apologies here on this show, and we'll start with this game. You said the Chiefs were going to hang 56 on the Raiders.
I said that
last week.
It's true.
I said that the Chiefs were going to win by 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
Neither one of those things happened. and I had to point out, we are not one of those shows where we're just going to pretend like what we said never happened. Like, I think it's important that we own up to our mistakes. We own up to what we say when it's wrong. And in this regard, we were wrong, and the Raiders played pretty good. Actually, they played really good on Sunday night against the Chiefs. Where do you want to start? What were your thoughts on that primetime game?
Yeah. So first, in regards to my prediction, just know, I truly did think I wasn't trying to get shock value or, and maybe it was in part I was riled up with all the, the bus talk throughout the week, but I really did feel like, with the status of the Raiders defense, and just kind of that extra motivation the Chiefs had, I thought there was going to be a lot of points on the board. And really, if you watch that first half, both offenses produced at that level that scores a ton of points, in the sense that very little mistakes were being made by either offense. It's just that they were coming in small clips, right? So, I think the first 4 possessions there were 4 scores because both teams were being so efficient, just kind of moving the ball down the field. Well, then, we're coming up on the half being over. So, I think that kind of stymied some of the points by that, maybe more efficient, methodical passing game than what you normally see out of the Chiefs or the Raiders. But as far as my takeaway, you're right. The Raiders are a good football team, but my biggest concern right now for the Kansas City Chiefs is their pass rush. I think I talked at the very beginning of the season, I may have said on this podcast, I'm almost positive that I did, that I felt like Frank Clark and Chris Jones could be as good a duo as Derek Thomas and Neil Smith. I feel more terrible for saying that than saying the Chiefs are going to score 56, because I have been dead wrong about that. And it's frustrating because that both of those players have the ability, they have the talent to do that, to produce at that level. And it's different when you have 2 defensive linemen that you're expecting to produce, because offenses can't really scheme around that as much as, if you just had a Frank Clark, or I think of JJ Watt a lot, the numbers aren't always there because it's one defensive lineman, and you can scheme for that. You can double team, you can chip, you can roll the quarterback out the opposite way. When you have 2 defensive linemen that often line up, opposite of each other, it's a lot harder for teams to do that, and we're just not getting there anyways. And if the offensive line of these other teams are focused on Chris Jones and Frank Clark, why are we not seeing anything out of Tano Passanio? Why are we not seeing more out of Derek Nandi? We've seen, Tershawn Wharton's kind of stepped up, and I'd like to see some more of him. He's kind of got that energy, that motor that you're just looking for out of somebody on the defensive line to get these guys going.
Well, and on the edge, where's Willie Gay? And he's doing a little bit here and there, but really, without Taco Charlton, that really only leaves Frank Clark to come around on the edge. I mean, I know you're talking about, defensive linemen, but there just really isn't a whole lot of weapons out there able to put that rush on. I don't know if you saw the stat or not that for the game against the Raiders, the Chiefs got 1 hit on Derek Carr the entire night. 1. There were 0 sacks. That's unlike the Chiefs, right? That's just not like what we're used to seeing over the years from this Kansas City squad, where they're just not able to get hardly any pressure on the quarterback.
Well, and it's not like Steve Spagnuolo either, because he's one that brings pressure. So,
yeah.
You mentioned Willie Gay, you mentioned, even, Damian Wilson or any of those guys, coming up through the middle. That's got to be designed, because when you play a 4-3, like Willie Gay is not going to rush the passer unless a stunt is on from Steve Spagnuolo. So, it's kind of odd that and really tiring. That's another guy from the safety position that you've seen in the past, Steve Spagnuolo, really bring him, from the safety position into the backfield, and you're just not seeing that. And that's where I don't know, is there something that they saw that made them feel like they couldn't play man coverage to the Raiders? Were they that worried about getting beaten by Nelson Aguilar and Henry Ruggs that they just felt like they couldn't leave their corners on an island?
And that was so shocking to me, because when I think of elite wide receivers, I don't think of Nelson Aguilar, Henry Ruggs, and Hunter Renfrow.
No.
I think Darren Waller is an okay tight end. In fact, I think he's probably above average as a tight end. But and again, you're the expert. I'm not when it comes to defensive schemes and things like that. But I felt like all night long, the Chiefs were sitting back in this soft zone and just getting carved up over and over and over again by wide open receivers. And a lot of it was long developing plays. A lot of it was Derek Carr having a lot of time in the pocket. And just, these receivers were wide open by 10 yards or more. Like nobody was around them. Yeah. It almost, to me, I watched that defensive effort and I wasn't thinking Steve Spagnuolo, I was thinking Bob Sutton. That's what it felt like to me as I was watching the Chiefs on defense. It was the first time I even tweeted this. The game on Sunday was the first time since the 2018 AFC Championship game against the Patriots where I was genuinely scared when the Raiders got the ball back, when the other team got the ball. I'm like, the Chiefs can't stop them. There's nothing that they've been able to do all night to stop Derek Carr and the offense of Las Vegas. And that's concerning to me, especially moving forward.
Yeah. And, I will say, though, I think the Raiders do present a kind of a unique problem for the Chiefs defense because, Darren Waller, I mean, he is tight end number 3 in this league. It's, Kittle and Kelsey, obviously, and then Darren Waller. And I think those 3 separate themselves from every other tight end in this league. And he does create that problem where, you're not often focusing so much on tight ends where you have to concern more than 1 or 2 defenders, about what Darren Waller's doing. And then when they do have, like you said, look, Henry Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar, they're not elite wide receivers, but they do have elite speed. So I think that does actually what the Raiders have, and then with the run game with Josh Jacobs, they actually kind of do create a unique problem, particularly for the Chiefs. But the thing is, the way to beat any team is creating pressure from your front 4. When you don't have to bring a linebacker or a safety, you don't have to call those stunts. That is just so much more helpful for your secondary. So your front 4 have to be able to get to the quarterback, and that's how we've gotten beat is when other teams' front 4 gets to the quarterback. So that's, I think, why I'm so disappointed in really the defensive line and particularly Chris Jones and Frank Clark. They just flat out have to do better. And they had good moments, but they're getting paid way too much just to have moments. Like those 2 need to be dominant all game.
Well, and Chris Jones also had a pretty key offsides penalty at one point.
Yeah.
During the game where he was lined up. I mean, it was like a D Ford moment all over again. He was just lined up offsides. And when you sign that huge contract, when you become one of the cornerstones of this franchise, you can't do things like that. Like you can have an off game. You cannot be at your best, and that's all right. Like I get that. But little things like that, like lining up offsides, that was a critical penalty that I don't exactly remember where that was in the gameplay, but I remember it was like a third down or something like that. Where it was a crucial moment where the Chiefs could have gotten the ball back, and instead it extended the drive for the Raiders. So you've got to be better than that if you're Chris Jones. You've got to be able to perform at a higher level, and especially moving forward, I can't imagine that anybody on that defense was thrilled about their performance on Sunday night against the Raiders. They've got to shore it up because this Sunday they're on the road in Tampa. They're taking on Tom Brady. They're taking on Leonard Fournette and Chris Godwin and Ronald Jones and
Antonio
Brown, Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski. Like it's another team that has a lot of weapons in the Buccaneers and a pretty experienced coach in Bruce Arians. So defensively, Kansas City has to shore it up, especially if they want to be considered, at this point, one of the front runners in the AFC, if not the entire league.
Yeah, and I do think the Bucs kind of present. I actually think they're a little bit of a better matchup for the Chiefs, and particularly that offensive line for the Bucs has had some struggles this season. So I would look for sure to see that defensive line hopefully have a bounce back game. Get to Tom Brady a couple times, but you're right. I think the defense really. They need to fix some things and they need to get some guys healthy too. There's some guys out on the defensive line right now. So they need to get some guys healthy and hopefully the defense can continue to compete at a level to match what the offense is doing, because, and this is kind of the perfect transition, right? What Patrick Mahomes is doing right now is special, and I think it's almost being underappreciated, and there's almost not a lot to talk about really with the offense, right? Even after a game-winning drive from Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce, but it's just so expected now, and I think that's where, we've talked about this on previous podcasts, but that's where we're at with Pat, and it's really a special thing to watch.
Yeah, you absolutely walk away from this game happy you got the win with, against the Raiders. You're not thrilled about the way that the game played out, but a win's a win. And it didn't really even register with me going into this game how important it was. If the Raiders had won the game, they would be a game behind the Chiefs, and they would have owned the tiebreaker, against Kansas City. So it was a pretty important game for the Chiefs. And the fact that, they have like a minute 24 left on the clock, and, Kansas City was able to march it down, and Pat was able to find Kelce to win the game. And at that point, it's just, you have to tip your cap, there's really, you're watching excellence. You're watching greatness. We say it every week. You almost run out of things to say about how special Pat Mahomes is. And how important he is. The Chiefs don't win that game without him, but he is absolutely continuing to perform at an MVP caliber level. And I agree with you. He's being underappreciated right now, but I think that that's just going to continue.
Yeah, and it's hard to I'm standing by my statement, but it's hard to say someone's underappreciated and they're probably the MVP frontrunner, but I truly feel like he is the MVP frontrunner and still being underappreciated. I don't know if you caught, Tommy, on that touchdown pass to Travis Kelce to pretty much seal the game. Pat rolled out to his right, and the Raiders were in a cover 4, meaning, the safeties both had, safeties and 2 corners each had a fourth of the field, right? So Pat rolls out to his right and starts to come up to the line, and they were on the 25, maybe 30-yard line. Yeah. And the safety who for some reason ran up was Jonathan Abram, which I don't know if you've paid enough attention to the Raiders defense to know how annoying that guy is, but the fact that he was the one to blow the coverage when Pat rolled up, I was just so happy. I'm sure there's a lot of Chiefs fans that felt the same. So that was pretty exciting. Good win for the Chiefs. You're right. Big win just for the AFC West, and to continue on if they want to have a shot at that 1 seed, since the Steelers have such a cupcake schedule.
Yeah, they really do. The Steelers continue to win. They're still undefeated. They do play the Ravens as of right now. Yeah. I know the Ravens are shut down due to COVID, but as of now, the game is still on schedule for Thanksgiving night. And the Ravens do present a challenge to Pittsburgh. So we'll see how that game ends up. The final note with Kansas City, Andy Reid. I don't know if you knew this stat or this number. Coming off a bye week, Andy Reid is 19-3 in his entire career. He's lost 3 times in 22 years as a head coach in the NFL. That's not an anomaly. That's not a coincidence. Andy Reid knows how to prepare his team coming off a bye week. And even though it was probably a little bit closer than what he would have liked against the Raiders, they were still able to get the win and pad that resume a little bit more for Andy Reid. The other stat that I thought was really impressive that I saw on the broadcast, and I don't know the exact numbers, but how Andy Reid is the all-time greatest when it comes to road winning percentage. Yeah. I didn't even know that. I mean, he's higher than Belichick. He's higher than all these other legendary coaches as far as winning on the road. It's just impressive. And you want to talk about a guy who's been underappreciated for a long time is Andy Reid. And that other than Bill Belichick, there's not a better coach in the NFL right now than Andy.
No, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I don't think anybody would argue he's going to end his career as, I think, a top 5 coach of all time. I mean, incredible career, just as of right now from Andy Reid as he continues to build his legacy.
Without a doubt. Let's go ahead and get into some college football news and talk about the Farmageddeon game on Saturday, which ended up not being much of a game at all, as the number 17th ranked Iowa State Cyclones destroyed the Kansas State Wildcats by a final score of 45-0. This is the second area where you and I, Weston, probably owe an apology because we were both pretty much flat out wrong with this game. I think both you and I said that we thought the Wildcats could hang with the Cyclones that was absolutely not the case, as the Cyclones jumped out to a big lead, never let it go, and the Wildcats never even got on the board.
No, and Iowa State is just a dang good football team. Breece Hall, 15 carries, 135 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, the Wildcats just had no answer for him, but not many teams have had an answer for Breece Hall all season. I think really just obviously us included, Tommy, a lot of people are just underestimating how good this 6-2 Iowa State football team is. I think they've, it's too bad they kind of faltered early on in their season, and they could have really surprised some people and won the Big 12, I think.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Breece Hall with 2 touchdowns, 135 yards on the ground. That kid is special. Brock Purdy only threw the ball 20 times. He threw for 236 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. Very efficient passing for the Cyclones quarterback, and just, every phase of the football, the Cyclones just outclassed the Wildcats. So taking a look at the Big 12 standings, of course, Iowa State in the lead. They are 6-1 in the conference, 6-2 overall. Oklahoma had a pretty decisive win against the Cowboys in Bedlam with Oklahoma State on Saturday. So Oklahoma moves to 5-2 in conference. The Longhorns of Texas are 4-2 along with Oklahoma State. They're 4-2 as well. This is going to drop the Wildcats all the way down to 4-3 in the conference and 4-4 overall. When you're assessing this Wildcat season right now, it wasn't that long ago. It was just a couple of weeks ago that we were talking about the Wildcats in the lead for the Big 12. They faltered a little bit in recent weeks. How do you assess where K-State is right now?
Well, I think this is something I kind of mentioned in the beginning. I think they just have a lot of young talent, and I think middle of the road is, that shouldn't be too disappointing. I mean, I know K-State fans don't want to hear that, but look at the young talent you have. It's incredibly promising, but the Big 12 is not a conference that you're going to take a freshman quarterback and a freshman running back and just run through the league. It's just not going to happen in the Big 12. It's too talented of a conference. So I think for K-State fans, they really ought to focus on the talent that they have and what you can see for the future. And I know that sucks because everybody wants to win now, and I get it. As KU fans, Tommy, we're ready to win now. We don't want to rebuild, and not that K-State's rebuilding, but I just 4-4, and they've been competitive. They've been a dang good football team, other than this pretty embarrassing loss to Iowa State. So, I think they probably are where a lot of folks would expect they were, knowing that that Will Howard was going to play without Skylar Thompson. So that's kind of the thing, in my estimation.
Yeah, and there could be a little bit of a quarterback controversy for the Wildcats moving forward. Will Howard was roughed up, pretty big time against the Cyclones, really could never get it going. And so at one point during the game, Chris Kleiman pulled Will Howard and put in Nick Ost to play the QB position for K-State on Saturday. So not exactly sure what might happen in the coming weeks, but it could be either Nick Ost or Will Howard, I guess, moving forward. We're not exactly sure about that from Chris Kleiman. But yeah, Will Howard was only 3 of 9 for 32 yards and an interception before he was pulled right before halftime. And then Nick Ost was 6 for 10 when he came in, but he only threw for 44 yards. So neither one of them really did great, but it'll be interesting to see who Chris Kleiman goes with moving forward.
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't make the old Les Miles decision and go with the dual quarterback system. Not we're going to go with the hot hand system. Tommy and I, we have spoke our minds to a 2 quarterback system enough that I'm sure our listeners do not want to hear it again.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that you and I are not fans of that system at all. The Wildcats travel on the road to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears this Saturday. That game time is at 6 p.m. We mentioned it last week on the program that the Jayhawks and the Longhorns were not playing because of COVID issues. So taking a look at the Jayhawks schedule, they're on as of right now to take on TCU at home in Lawrence this Saturday night at 7 p.m. No word on what might be happening with that game, although I do know that Les Miles mentioned in his weekly radio show that as of right now, it looked like the Jayhawks were good to go as far as health is concerned to play play the game this weekend against TCU. So as of right now, a couple of games on the schedule, one for the Wildcats and one for the Jayhawks. Hopefully better fortunes for both teams as we get to this weekend. Let's go ahead and get into our Wichita Whip Around right now on Keeper of the Games. And we're going to start with some really, really big breaking news in the state high school sports, especially here in the Wichita Metro. So on Tuesday, the KSHAA Board of Directors met and they approved winter high school sports in the state to begin as scheduled, but without fans. So they approved that calendar on Tuesday. The final vote count was 53 for and 22 against. So the vote allows competition to begin on December 1st for winter sports and resume after the winter break on January 8th. Practices can then begin again on January 4th, and middle school activities will be on that same plan. No spectators allowed from the beginning until January 28th. There was an amendment on there to allow 2 spectators per participant, but that was voted down. But I think the big news there, Weston, that I think everybody can be happy about is the fact that winter sports will at least go on as scheduled, although there will be no fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said last time, I think I was kind of on the fence about this. I was fine with them delaying the start of the season as long as it's just delayed, just to make sure that those kids don't ultimately lose games because people are testing positive and getting canceled. Ultimately it's about getting those games played. So, but I guess on the other hand, you certainly think, look, if they delay that start of the season, those, boys and girls playing high school basketball, they're going to be getting together and practicing whether it's sanctioned or not, so you might as well just have, a coach, someone watching over them, trying to implement the best safety that they can. So I'm glad everybody gets to play. And ultimately, I think keeping the games going is the right decision.
Well, and I think about basketball, high school basketball around the state, they had their season cut short. There was no state championship, for basketball last year because of COVID when everything kind of broke down and the whole thing got canceled. But then fall sports got to play. Football is going to get to have its entire season.
Yeah.
It would have been a shame for winter sports to be delayed again, just based on the timing of everything. So I think the most important thing, I know that parents are going to be disappointed that they can't go and watch.
Yeah.
We talked about this at the very beginning of the football season about how it was a bummer that you weren't going to be able to have fans there and that sort of thing. But the most important thing is the kids get to play and they're going to get a chance to do so. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know we've hashed this all over when we talked about, USC 259's decision to cancel football earlier in the season, or I guess fall sports. But, and just giving those kids, opportunity to have tape out there for college recruitment and really to get to live out their senior season, which may, end their sports career altogether, I think is a fantastic decision. So glad to see these guys playing. And really, in my opinion, also good to see KSHAA put forth a full process to hear everyone out, make a good informed decision. Like we felt that the USC 259 was not affording those students when that decision came down in the fall.
And they opened up the meeting to the public I think it was on Zoom. And so anybody could join and ask questions and that sort of thing. So KSHAA very transparent through the process. And they listened to as many people as they could and made a decision that they thought was based off of health and safety and still being able to get the competition in. So that's the news that winter sports around the state and in the Wichita area will begin as scheduled. Let's talk about state football playoffs. We've been talking about this the last few weeks and updating you as the weeks go on about what teams are moving on, what teams are going home. In Weston, we now have our state championship games set and ready to go for this weekend. Let's start in 6A. In the sub-state round, Derby put on a convincing victory against Junction City by a score of 62-27. We've talked multiple times about the monkey on their back, the challenges that they've had this season. But you wouldn't know it by looking at them and watching them play football right now. As they move on to the state championship round, they will take on Blue Valley North, who defeated Olathe North last weekend by a score of 30-20. So it'll be Derby and Blue Valley North in the 6A state championship game.
Yeah, once you start getting into the Blue Valley school system, they produce some pretty high-end Division I athletes year in and year out. It feels like. So this would be it's obviously it's a state championship game, but Derby's got their work cut out for them. But boy, it feels like Derby is rolling just at the right time.
Yeah, they've got the momentum right now for sure. They've, gotten all the negative stuff out of the way early on in the season, and they are on their way to what could be another 6A state championship for the Panthers. In 5A, your boys at Wichita Northwest got the victory against Bishop Carroll last week, 41-21. Hats off to Bishop Carroll and the run that they had, and an even stronger hats off to Wichita Northwest as they won the Battle of Tyler Road. They will move on to the 5A state championship game, taking on Mill Valley, who defeated Aquinas by a final score of 42-7 in Sub-State. Mill Valley, by the way, if you'll remember, is the team that defeated Derby back at the very beginning of the season. Now they will face Wichita Northwest in the 5A championship game.
Yeah, Mill Valley, another one of those perennial powerhouses up here in the Johnson County area. I think if I remember right, and I probably should have this in front of me, but I think Mill Valley, their starting quarterback or running back, it got injured in the beginning of the season and was out for the season. So I don't know what kind of depth they have. Northwest maybe not looking at the full strength of Mill Valley, but still always incredible talent coming out of Mill Valley. Northwest will have the work cut out for them.
Taking a look at 4A, shout out to our Kansas City. They beat McPherson in a nail biter. Final score of that game, 28-27. And then on the other side of the bracket in 4A, St. James beat Bishop Miege in overtime by a final score of 36-35. So 2 one-point games to determine who will be going to the state championship game in 4A. It's going to be our Kansas City and St. James. I want to talk about Ark City. I know that they're not really in the Wichita metro. They're about an hour outside of Wichita, but Ark City, I don't know if you knew this, they entered the playoffs with a record of 2-6. That's the record when they entered the playoffs. They are now 6-6. They've won 4 games in a row, and they're going to the state championship game in 4A.
What in the world is going on with 4A? Is Ark City rolling, or do we have some weird stuff going on in the 4A playoffs? That's incredible. Bishop Miege is one of those teams that, I know when Andale was in 4A, struggled being able to compete with them a couple years in a row. So the fact that St. James knocked them off, I think that Ark City might be looking at, a pretty good matchup here.
Yeah, Ark City is playing with house money, right now for sure.
Yeah.
This is the furthest that they've gotten in the playoffs in over 30 years.
Wow.
And they're making it to the 4A state championship game. Again, they'll be taking on St. James in the championship. And then in 3A, I mean, what can you say? Your boys from Andale, the Indians, pretty convincing win against Collegiate by a final score of 49-0 as they defeated Wichita Collegiate in the sub-state round. They will take on Perry Lecompton, who defeated Holton last week by a score of 22-9. So we'll see the Andale Indians in the 3A state championship game. And in Weston, it seems like there are only a few things that are for sure in this life: death, taxes, and Andale in the 3A state championship game.
Yeah, I mean, big shout out to Coach Schmidt, Coach Fairchild. Coach Fairchild was there when I was playing, and he's pretty much run such an incredible tight ship defense for Andale for years now, throwing another shutout last week against Wichita Collegiate. And Andale's going to run that football. That's what they've done, for as long as I can remember. Before when I was there, it was Coach O'Hare, and then Coach Schmidt. Now it was Coach Paul Schmidt before the current Coach Schmidt. So run the football. That's what Andale does, and hopefully going to bring home another state championship.
Yeah, so again, they will take on Perry Lecompton in the state championship game this weekend. In 2A, it's going to be Hoisington and Rossville in the state championship game. 1A, you've got Oakley taking on Olpe, which I just think is a lot of fun to say, Oakley and Olpe in 1A. And then in 8-man Division 1, it'll be Little River taking on Wichita County in the championship game. And 8-man Division 2 will be Hanover taking on St. Francis. So the bracket has gotten all the way down to the state championship game. And how big of a relief is it for all of these teams that we were able to get through a full season and pretty much a full playoff bracket. I know we had, I think, one forfeit due to COVID, and that was Dodge City early on in the bracket, but really being able to get through the entire bracket and get an entire season under in the books. I mean, that's just huge.
Hats off to all these coaches for running pretty tight ship programs. And of course, hats off to the players. They must have been doing the right things in order to keep themselves, safe and healthy, and the other teams and players safe and healthy. So hats off to really everyone involved.
We'll have an update on who the state champions will be in each class next week on Keeper of the Games. That's going to wrap things up for our Wichita Whip Around. Let's get right into our Finally Funny. We're going back and talking more Kansas City Chiefs and their matchup against the Raiders on Sunday night. And Weston, you've got some pretty hilarious news about that.
Yeah, so I've actually, I told you before the show I had one Finally Funny. I actually got two, Tommy. So I don't know did you get a chance to see Barstool Sports tweeted a picture? Did you see the picture of Derek Carr on the sideline? He had his face down, looked like he was glaring, and it looked like he had his eyeliner on like he always does. Yeah. They tweeted out that picture with when Sephora runs out of eyeliner, and then the picture of Derek Carr, which is good. So I'll retweet that to the Keeper of the Game account. So
by the way, he looked like he was auditioning for a role in Twilight, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, or every early 2000s pop rock band that we all listened to. Same thing. Maybe it's Blink 182 or something. And then the other Finally Funny defensive lineman Khalen Saunders. As we've talked many a times about the whole victory lap bus situation leading up to the Raiders game. After the game, Khalen Saunders tweeted, "No need for a victory lap. We'll just take being undefeated at the beautiful, newly built, state-of-the-art Allegiant Stadium," which I thought was just a perfect seal, to kind of end that whole drama saga situation. So shout out to Khalen Saunders for it's Khalen Saunders. His Twitter handle is Khalen, not Khalen. That's literally what his Twitter handle is. It's Khalen Saunders. So
you still got it wrong.
Khalen. Jesus. Khalen.
Yeah. Khalen You'll get it right eventually. I would imagine.
Saunders got it. Yeah.
That's our Finally Funny here on Keeper of the Games. And that's going to wrap up this episode. Just again, a huge thank you to Gary Bedore from the Kansas City Star joining us here on the podcast to talk about KU basketball. Again, as of right now, as we're recording this, the Jayhawks they're scheduled to play the Gonzaga Bulldogs on Thanksgiving in the Fort Myers tip-off. So hopefully that happens and we get a chance to see KU hoops on Thanksgiving. But a special thanks again to Gary Bedore for taking time out of his busy schedule to talk to us about all things KU basketball. And, Weston, Thanksgiving right around the corner. You guys have big plans? You doing anything?
No, nope. It'll just be pretty much my immediate family is pretty much, all we're doing. We've kind of decided to hold off on the big stuff this year. I mean, not COVID aside, we've my grandma's kind of got some health issues, so we're all kind of decided, hey, let's let grandma, stay away from everybody, and we'll just do stuff individually this year. So that's it. That's all we got.
Well, good deal. Yeah, we're doing the same thing. We just kind of our immediate family and not doing anything big with extended family this year. It's going to be better to keep it small and keep it safe. And then hopefully we'll get a chance to have big celebrations here in no time. That's the goal for sure.
Now, I will say we're actually celebrating, Thanksgiving with my parents and then my sister and her husband on Friday because my sister's going to her in-laws on Thanksgiving. So on Thanksgiving, we're going to carry on the tradition of Steaksgiving, which is something my wife and I had started when she was always on call on Thanksgiving, and it was just her and I. So we're going to do steaks on Thanksgiving, and I'm really pushing this Steaksgiving thing. I think it's better than turkey. I mean, unpopular opinion, but give me a steak over a turkey leg any day.
You could always trademark that term, and because Friendsgiving is a really big thing now. So you can take Steaksgiving and maybe be like a billionaire because of that idea.
Hey, Tommy, I'm all in, and I'm happy to even just give it to the world if we as a society can embrace Steaksgiving, steaks on Thanksgiving. Come on, folks. Turkey's not the best food we have in America. Let's put forth our best efforts. A big old ribeye on Thanksgiving Day just would be perfect with a day full of football and friends and family.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not even going to blow the hot take horn because I think that's something that I could definitely get behind. And I think a lot of other red-blooded American males could get behind that as well. Want to remind you all to hit subscribe. That way, anytime we have a brand new episode of the podcast, you will get a notification. Again, you can listen on platforms like Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, all the major platforms you can listen to Keeper of the Games right there. Of course, you can go to our website, cogsports.com, KOGsports.com, and watch archived episodes and a whole lot more right there on our new website. You can, again, watch full episodes on YouTube and Facebook by searching for Keeper of the Games, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CogPod. That's at KOGPod. We're thankful for all of you for listening, and we'll be back with a new episode in a week or so. And so with that, Weston, happy Thanksgiving, man.
Yeah, thanks. Same to you, Tommy, and hope our fans enjoyed a little bit of the extra long episode here, as they've got hopefully plenty of time off work over the next 4 or 5 days or so, and can enjoy some of our content.
Absolutely. Hope you all have an awesome Thanksgiving, and we'll be back with another episode soon. For Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. You've been listening to Keeper of the Games.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games with Tommy Castor and Weston Mills. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at CogPod. That's KOG Pod.